Hey guys, it's actually going to be our very last notes video of this entire school year. I'm going to finish up by talking a little bit about the digestive system. It's our last body system. So, we talked in our last section about the circulatory system. And the digestive system and the circulatory system, they work together. They work together to obtain nutrients and then deliver those nutrients to all the cells of the body. So the digestive system itself, its function, its purpose is to take large chunks of food and then break those large chunks down into smaller pieces of food, smaller molecules that can actually make their way into the blood of the circulatory system and then be transported around the body. So, for example, you see this picture on the lower right. So this guy's eating a big, juicy Impossible burger. And so, as I'm sure you know, the foods we eat give us energy. But how does that energy, how does that actually get to our cells? Do little chunks of Impossible burger float around in our blood to our cells? No, of course not. What happens is those large compounds, those big molecules, are broken up by the digestive system into very simple things. Things like sugars, simple sugars, glucose, amino acids, fatty acids. And so these materials, once they're broken down that small, they're able to be diffused into the blood and then delivered to the cells. So digestion actually begins in our mouth. So there's two types of digestion. There's the mechanical digestion, which is actually breaking food into smaller pieces. So if you put a pretzel in your mouth and chew it up with your teeth, that's mechanical digestion. You took that big chunk of pretzel and you're breaking it mechanically into smaller pieces. And that's an important step, because when you break a large chunk of something into smaller pieces, you're increasing the surface area. And that allows for the next part to take hold, and that's chemical digestion. Chemical digestion, it also starts in your mouth, and it is when enzymes, special molecules, help to take those large molecules and break them up into very simple components. Okay. We actually have an enzyme in our saliva. It's called salivary amylase. Saliva is not just like water in our mouth. It actually has this enzyme in it. And salivary amylase is an enzyme that takes starches and breaks them down into simple sugars, such as glucose. And you could test this out sometimes. If you take like a starchy, like a saltine cracker or something, put it in your mouth, and chew it up really, really well, and just leave it in your mouth, let it soak with saliva, what you might notice is that after a little while, it'll start to taste sweet. And the reason for that is because the enzymes in your saliva have broken down the starch molecules into their simpler components, which are simple sugars. We have in our mouth, and you can see them in this picture on here, we have salivary glands sort of around our mouth, and they squirt saliva into our mouth at different times. In fact, sometimes if you're like looking at your phone or something and you yawn, you might see a spray of saliva come out of your mouth and spray your phone. That's because when you happen to have your mouth open, your salivary glands are spraying saliva out. Thinking about food can get your salivary glands thinking they're about to eat, and so they spray your mouth with saliva. And so after we start mechanical digestion and chemical digestion in our mouth, we eventually swallow our food. So when you swallow your food, it moves into the next part of the digestive system, the esophagus. It's basically a tube connects your back of your mouth down to your stomach. It's a muscular tube, and when you swallow something, what actually happens, it doesn't just sort of drop into your stomach. It's sort of squeezed there by a process that's called peristalsis. What happens is the muscles of your esophagus, they squeeze one and then the next and the next and the next, and it squeezes the food down into your stomach. kind of like squeezing toothpaste out of a tube. And so once you swallow the food, it ends up in your stomach. The stomach is sort of a pouch. It's a muscular pouch, sort of down, sort of below your rib cage on your right side. And it is a muscular sort of sac. It can expand when you eat food, and then it can shrink down to a smaller size when you're not eating. And the stomach contains strong acids, hydrochloric acid, which is, again, the purpose of this acid is to help further break down the foods into sort of a soupy liquid that's called chyme. And over time, the food stays in the stomach for a while. It's sort of churned around, mixed with this hydrochloric acid, and breaks down over time until it gets liquidy and broken down into simpler components. You probably noticed this. I'm sure all of you have gotten sick before and vomited, but if you happen to get sick soon after eating something, what comes out sort of looks like what you ate. If it's been a while since you've eaten, that material that comes up is not recognizable. It's more like a soup than it was the stuff you probably ate, and it's kind of gross, but I'll give you an idea about how that process takes place. From the stomach, then, which we see here, it's this white organ, the food will move after a period of time into this long tube called the small intestine. It's called the small intestine, not because it's short, it's very long. It's about 25 feet long. It's stretched across my whole kitchen here. It's called the small intestine because it's narrower than the large intestine in diameter. And so as the food moves through this really long tube, again, it's moved through peristalsis, squeezed through this long vent tube. It's all kind of wound up in your abdomen. And along the way, the food is further being digested, broken down. And also, this is where the nutrients that it's been broken down to can be absorbed into your blood. So surrounding these intestines are capillaries from our circulatory system. When the food has been broken down enough, these simple molecules can diffuse through the wall of the intestine into our capillaries, where then the nutrients can be distributed all throughout the body. Okay. Most of the digestion of our food takes place in this long tube called the small intestine. Along the way, there are some organs that are sort of helpers, sometimes called accessory organs, because they help digestion happen, but the food doesn't actually go through these organs. One of them is the liver. The liver has several purposes, several functions in our body. One of them is related to digestion. The liver makes a substance called bile, and bile is a material that will break down fat, large groups of fats into smaller pieces that can be digested more easily. Okay. It's also responsible for helping to remove toxins from our blood, the liver is. And so after our liver makes this substance called bile, it sends it into a little storage area called the gallbladder. Okay. Gallbladder is this little thing kind of hiding underneath the liver, and the bile is made in the liver, goes into this gallbladder, and then whenever the bile is necessary, the gallbladder kind of squirts it into the bile duct, which then leads into the small intestine. There's another organ, the pancreas, which also helps to produce these enzymes. Pancreatic juices are what they call a mixture of enzymes that helps to further break down the foods. Okay, the pancreas also is what produces insulin that helps lower blood sugar when it starts to rise. And so these organs, the liver, gallbladder, pancreas, like I said, food doesn't actually go through them, but they are accessory organs. They add to the enzymes that help to digest the food. The small intestine itself, it's not sort of just like a smooth, hollow tube. It's not like a hose on the inside. It it actually has all of these sort of bumps and ridges. As you can see in this diagram, all these bumps, they're called villi. They're really important for digestion and absorption. What these villi do is that's where the capillaries are, these tiny blood vessels. So as the food is moving through the small intestine, it's moving past these villi, and that's when nutrients can diffuse from that food that's in the small intestine into the blood, and then, like I said earlier, and then be transported throughout the body. So these villi are very important. They increase the surface area where nutrients can be absorbed. Finally, after the food makes its way through this long small intestine tube, it makes its way through the final section. This is the large intestine. It goes up the right side of our body, across our abdomen, down the left side of our body, and then out of the body. That's the large intestine. Sometimes called the colon. And by the time the food reaches the large intestine, it's pretty much been fully digested. There's nothing left to digest once the material enters the large intestine. All that's left is for the body to sort of reabsorb any water that's left in that food so it can be reused. And so that happens as the material is moving through this large intestine. But there's no actual digestion going on in the large intestine. Eventually, anything that wasn't digested, undigestible material, along with some water, is eliminated from the body through the rectum. Okay, and that's feces. Feces goes through the rectum, out the anus, hopefully into the toilet. And that's the pathway that food takes as it makes its way through our digestive system. If we look at a diagram, again, maybe try and label this on your own if you could. You should know the organs and how food travels through them. So if we look at this diagram, it's kind of not shown very well at the beginning. The mouth is up here somewhere. But food goes through the esophagus, into the stomach, finally next into the small intestine, eventually into the large intestine, up, over, down, and then along the way, the liver, okay, and the gallbladder, which is hiding under here, and the pancreas add material to that digesting food. Eventually, undigested material comes through the rectum and out the anus. And that's how food moves through the digestive system. Some things that can happen in the digestive system in terms of disease and problems. Colon cancer is cancer when cancer develops in the large intestine. It's a fairly common form of cancer. Diarrhea is a disease of the digestive system when the body leaves too much water in this undigested material of the large intestine. Then the feces is quite runny. If food's not moving through it effectively and too much water has been removed, that could lead to constipation. Ulcers are a form of digestive disease when that acid that's in the stomach can actually start to just damage the lining of the stomach. It typically is a lining that helps protect the stomach from the acid. When it doesn't, it can start to damage the stomach, and that's an ulcer. If you've ever felt heartburn, when stomach acids creep up from the stomach into the esophagus, it causes a burning, painful sensation in the chest. That's heartburn. It's not actually caused by anything related to the heart. It's caused by stomach acid getting into the esophagus and irritating it. And sometimes called acid reflux. And you have medicines you could take to relieve that. And if a person has chronic heartburn, like every day, that esophagus can be damaged permanently. Sometimes a doctor might want to look into the digestive system to see what's going on. They can do that using an endoscope. Endoscopy is when they sedate a person, put sort of a camera down a tube that goes into their esophagus and into their stomach and beginning of the small intestine. They could see if there's any damage. They can see if there's certain problems. There's also sort of the same kind of thing, but from the other side, a colonoscopy, if you've heard of that. The doctor uses a camera that goes in through the rectum into the large intestine. And they can look and see the health of the large intestine, see if there's any signs of possibly cancer and things like that. So those are different ways. They actually now have a pill that has a camera in it. And basically it's like a large pill that you swallow, and then it relays images via like Bluetooth to a computer. And the doctor can sort of, as this pill travels through the entire digestive system, the doctor can get a glimpse of sort of what's going on inside those organs. It has a tiny light in it, so it's pretty interesting. You can see videos online of how that works. So that's where we're going to leave off for the digestive system. So again, this is the last set of notes you're ever going to see for this year. But don't unsubscribe to Science Ross. Make sure you subscribe, share with your friends, like and comment below, and we'll talk to you later. Hope you have a great day.